Chapter 11. Double Date. I'd seen Kuvalik almost every day this week, much to the dismay of my mother. "James, I swear," she'd tell me as I would enter the door during the hours of dusk, "if you don't come home and sit down for a minute, your brain will explode. You can't keep doing everything." Fist to hips, her concern was always levelled as annoyance towards my contrary insistence. "I'm fine, Mum. My grades haven't died yet," I said each night before wandering into my room. "But you'll drop from exhaustion. You just watch," she warned, watching me walk away. I'd been visiting the ghost after or before school when I had nothing on, and he would invite me into his living room where he would have tea ready for me. Kuvalik was a lictus. He could manipulate electricity. I understood how he powered the kettle, but where he got the water and tea from, I'd never know. I drank his tea, some mix of a few flavours, and sat down on the cushion before the coffee table and couch. On the second day of our training, I complained to him about being so much less developed than Natalie. "How does it come so naturally to her?" I asked. "She made it out as if she didn't even try, yet here I am barely able to blow her hair around." "I don't think you should be caught up in comparing yourself to others, Maggie," Kuvalik said. "Zemel will be powerful in different areas than you will be. She was very spiritual, and I could sense that she had been connected to her soul long before she knew anything about being a Sneva." "Yeah, but it's crazy how bad I am." "Patience and an open mind, Maggie, is what it will take to gain strength in your abilities," Kuvalik spoke over me. "You are not bad. She is simply very connected. Becoming spiritual is a large obstacle which she has already dealt with. Where she flourishes, you may not. Where you flourish, she might not. Two separate souls and personalities would take two separate approaches using Gatra." "Well, fine," I huffed. "As long as I can be as useful as her." "That you will be. Every person has their own skills and uses. For everybody's uniqueness, there is a purpose. You must focus on your spirituality, on your soul, and believe more in yourself." I took Kuvalik's advice with me throughout the week. I have to progress spiritually, I told myself. But what does that even mean? I took the chance to do something I'd never even before considered. Meditation. I cleared a space on the floor of my room and sat down in it to clear my mind. I tried to drown out the sounds and stimuli of the day with my thoughts, then drown out my thoughts with silence. I found it difficult to think of nothing, though, and soon my mind wandered without me noticing. It wandered to the activity within the room. With my eyes closed, my mind was more open to the sensation of the air currents around me. I could feel them moving, the whole mass of the atmosphere in the room. I could feel the eddies and vortices which swirled slowly around my collection of figurines. I could feel the fullness, that sense of carbon, in the plastics which surrounded me. In my mind's eye, carbon was smeared across my vision like warmth on a heat map. The air swirled fastest around the room at the top and by the window, where the sun's rays danced, and slowest above the floor. I extended my hand to these currents, and drawing quattro from my thread, was able to connect to them. I pushed them with my hands to give them energy. Their flow became more erratic, causing turbulence in the once calm room. Every push I did would create entropy in this way, as if I was fighting the air and not a part of it. I could tell that this was not correct, and I expressed this to Kuvalik. He praised my sight. "For now, be satisfied with your ability to influence the air around you at all," he said. "The observation of entropy is an astute one to make. I'm not sure that many keen in history have tried to solve that issue. Maybe you'll be the first." He smiled at me. "But now," he started, "I would like to introduce you to Magus, carbon, and have you make your first proper connection to it. Did you bring pencils like I asked?" I went over to my bag and pulled out a collection of 2 short graphite pencils. "Can you feel the carbon in them?" he asked me. This got me into trouble once. I laughed nervously. "I can definitely feel it." "Great. We will expand your connection to carbon from sensing to manipulating," Kuvalik started. His ghoulish black body sat down on the couch, over the warmth of his tea. The steam coming from the cup simmered right through him. "Real elements will not move like air. You will not be able to give them motion in the same way," he explained. "You can telekinetically control their position, and you can change their shape, but you cannot give them the same kind of movement. What you can do is precise and delicate." "So, what, if you're changing the structure, then you're changing the bond energy, right?" I asked. "Yes, that is true," Kuvalik said, "and probably the one thing you will find easiest to do. But, remember, Makey, talking about conservation of energy was a guide. In order to understand all of your abilities through Katran, you must open your mind to what your soul feels it can do." Yes. Have patience and an open mind. I can't forget it by now," I noted as I grabbed the pencils in one hand. They had a familiar fullness of carbon. I was about to ask what it was that I should do to grab at the carbon and change it, but I figured that Kuvalik would never give me a straight answer anyway. If I wanted to progress spiritually, I had to take this initiative. I controlled my breathing to draw on Quattro in my threatened body. As it always did, it moved with my breath. I could feel my grip on the carbon, as I could with the air. I could feel the way that my soul could touch it and could change it. I could feel that if I reached out for it, I could mold it and call it to me. I used the Quattro energy to extend my grip. I wrapped my hand around the lead of the pencil and fueled my hand with energy. I could feel my grasp on the atoms of carbon. I almost had a sense of each individual one. I had the power to change how they interacted with each other. I could move them and alter their connections. I used my connection, gripping the atoms intently with my left hand from a distance. I had prepared for a tough pull, but the core slid out easily. I bowled myself over and smacked face first into the rotten-wooded floor. Kuvalik chuckled in his golden, ghostly echo as I stood up. I laughed it off unconvincingly as I reconnected. It was surprisingly easy to do. Without much thought, I could telekinetically hold this little rod of carbon in place. I grabbed it in my hand, and it melted to the touch of my fingers. I squished it into a ball, rolled it out into a snake, and formed a donut. It was like pure carbon putty. Next thing I'd be pushing it through a big squeezer to get fiberglass spaghetti. When you power your soul's connection more efficiently, you'll be able to perform higher energy feats, such as creating diamonds, Kuvalik explained. There's a lot you can do with carbon right now, but many more possibilities are to come. I can feel that, I said. I can feel that there too. Hopefully I'll improve quickly, I smiled. I think you will, Kuvalik said. He gestured to my tea, which was becoming cold, and I sipped it. It helped me to relax, and let my mind wander into connections and possibilities. Natalie wasn't pleased about the double date David had organised for Sunday. David was nice, but he really wasn't her type. He was just so softly spoken and unsure of himself. Natalie needed somebody who owned their own sense of authority, who had enough sass to defend themselves from her strong personality. She needed a man who was logical, witty, strong, yet reserved. That man was not David. Despite the fuss, she still agreed to come along, if only to meet the French girl herself and try to set me up with them. Tom had also crashed the night, turning the double date into a triple date by bringing Penelope along. All parties involved agreed that the diluted date would increase an ease of conversation between us, but David feared we would take Natalie's attention away from him. I told Tom that this would only work in David's favour. Natalie just wasn't interested in him, and this would be a much easier letdown. I didn't know what to expect of David's exchange student, though, and that made me nervous. More so, I knew exactly what to expect of myself. Social ineptitude, inability to detect flirting, inability to flirt myself. I was hopeless with girls. If it wasn't for destiny pushing me into Natalie, I'd never have talked to her, even though I wasn't romantically interested at all. The magnitude of my self-doubt was an enigma. I'd bore them, wouldn't I? I thought to myself. I mean, I know nothing about French culture or people. What do I say to this girl? What about me is interesting enough to hold a conversation with her? I looked at myself in the mirror, dressed nicely and with my shaving razor next to my face. I grazed it against my chin, painfully removing the stubble. I hope she's not that hot, I consoled myself. If she's not intimidating like that, maybe I'll be able to talk to her. Yes, the thought of her potential bad looks lifted my spirits, weirdly. I was dressed nicely, at least. Maybe it will make up for my lack of hot personality, I hummed, and cleaned myself up. Oh, where are you going now, looking that handsome? Mum seemed to coalesce from the shadows to catch my every movement. I smiled a wide grin, despite my nerves for the night ahead. Well, I'm going on a date, I beamed. The pride of telling my mother I had a date was much more uplifting than the act of going on the date. Is that really what you've been doing all week? She asked me. My face dropped. You think I'd ever get more than one date? I asked. Heavens no. Well, who's the girl? She swooned up to me, tugging on the collar of my shirt and pulling at the sleeves. Jesus, James, you couldn't even have ironed this, could you? Oh, come on, Mum. My nerves spiked. Did I look terrible? I didn't know how to iron. That was Mum's job. She's a French exchange student anyway. Fancy, Mum smiled. Good luck then, James. Do tell me in advance next time, though. Yes, Mum, I nodded and turned to leave. I got on my bicycle. I was glad that Mum liked my clothes, because I'd gone shopping midweek with Natalie and Tom to choose them. Tom was, antithesis to his rampant cool disregard for the opinions of others, a great shopper, but often with poor taste. He convinced me to buy my shirt, a somewhat slim-fitted number with a floral pattern. Not quite Hawaiian, but not far from it. Tom tried to convince Natalie to buy something, just for the sake of going in a few stores himself, but she refused. She told him that she had as many clothes as she ever needed at home. She was always practical, but never failed to dress well despite it. Even out of the shops, her casual look was upmarket reserve, with long flowing dresses and skirts, closed shoes, conservative shirts, and hair down. She didn't wear makeup either, which made me wonder if there was ever an occasion she considered right for it. Soon after setting off from home, I arrived at the house of a very flustered David. His exchange girl was still getting ready when I was let in. I would have to wait to meet my date. "Man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty nervous," he squeaked as he paced in his kitchen. I sipped apprehensively on a glass of water, hoping to omicronius, that black hole of mine, that my breath didn't smell or that I hadn't missed anything. Mate, you'll be fine." I patted him on the back, but he rolled his eyes and continued to pace. I tried to think of something to calm his nerves. His house was large, but entirely retro. The walls were wood-panelled straight out of the 70s, with entirely grey carpeted floor to match. The furniture was stuck in all years between, a mismatch clearly the result of only buying new furniture when the old one broke. "I guess if it makes it any better, we're both as screwed as each other," I said. "But you've got a London accent. That's about as charming as they come." He grinned and chuckled to himself. "Aren't you nervous?" he asked me. "Because you don't look it at all." "Really?" I asked, and a grin came to my face. "Well, that's a relief." "What, is this really James Gray before me? The same James who'll get nervous talking to a brick just in case he was bothering it?" "Oh, the very same," I agreed. "But maybe we've got to have fun with this, you know? You'll get nervous and go nowhere if you're too serious. Sit back, relax, and we'll let the good conversations flow." The words came out, and I'm not sure where in my brain they came from, because they made sense. David was taking a drink of water and caught my gaze down the barrel of his glass. His expression changed, as if he'd had a light bulb moment himself. "You're right, James," he admitted. "I'm missing the fun, and this is meant to be fun." A smile grew across his face, and it followed onto mine. "Oh, also, what is your exchange student's name?" I asked, realising that I'd forgotten it. "Celeste, man. You left that pretty late. That could have been awkward for you." "Well, yeah, it could have," I laughed. Then the doorbell rang. David's smile all but faded. "Oh, gee, I better go get that," he coughed. I walked behind him to the door, making sure that his stumbling, panicked body made it there. His open palm collided with the doorknob. His fingers tightened on to engage the unlocking sequence, and he hesitated. His hand twitched. There was a system malfunction. He took a deep breath in and amended the technical difficulty. He turned the knob and opened the door. Natalie looked stunning, standing on the other side of it. She was just in jeans, a blouse and a jacket, but she made it look elegant. She smiled sweetly at us as we opened the door, then shyly ducked her head to get through the doorway. Not that she needed to, and stepped past David and I. David looked halfway about to faint, halfway about to explode out of his skin. She turned to hug us each, and David tried to contain himself. "How are you doing, Natalie?" David asked her. "Welcome to my abode." "I'm doing very well, thanks, David." Natalie smiled politely. She examined the furnishings around, clearly taken by the mismatched homewares. "Well, let me give you the grand tour, then," he offered. That sounds great." Natalie smiled again. He went to grab her hand to show her around, but she politely pretended she had not noticed his hand, and so could not take it. She followed him into the house. David took his hand back and submerged it deep into his pocket, not daring to remove it. I decided to leave them alone, to let David soak in the social torture of a one-on-one interaction. I could hear his helpless mumbles echo up the stairs as he showed her the top floor. Maybe he'd leave me alone with Celeste later in the night, and I could learn from the same anguish. I went to David's room to make sure that I was looking alright, and to put on some more cologne. He had a vanity table with a crystal clear mirror, covered in his sister's old boy band stickers. The room used to belong to his sister before she moved out, and the vanity table was included in David's room upgrade package. Tom, David, and I laughed about it. We agreed that he'd be at least a little more likely to bring a girl home than I would, with my action figure collection. The rest of his room was lusciously stylish, an antithesis to the rest of the house. It was filled with paraphernalia, from soccer trophies to photos, old action figures, and a collection of protein powders. His bed was retro in all the right ways, and the head of it contained a built-in radio. On his white and cream walls hung artwork and famous records. I made my way over to the vanity table and took a whiff of his cologne. Ugh, I fanned my nose. Why did I think this would be a good idea? As I moved my hand around, I subconsciously connected myself to the air around me. A small breeze brushed back and forth across my face. I grinned and glanced over my shoulder to check that the door was closed. It was. I stood up and adopted a fighting stance. I could feel the size of the room through the air, and with my advanced spatial sense, the line of action figures sitting on the bed's head. I jumped up, pivoting on my right foot to face the bed. "Bad guys should watch out," I narrated to myself with a grin plastered over my face. I directed my open-palmed fighting stance towards the row of figurines. "Because there's a new hero in town, and his name is Maggie." Gripping into the air in the room, I summoned Quattro from my thread. I pushed my left hand forward like a punch, and a jet-like gust of air followed its motion. The blast hit the target with incredible accuracy and dealt a devastating blow to the assorted action men. I followed through with a right jab. A blast of air flew past me. The fallen men of the bedhead were pushed hard and scraped along the wooden surface. I blew my hands like a cowboy across the barrel of his smoking gun. My grin was insatiable. "Gee, I love this." I jauntily swayed back to face the door, a smug smile radiating. The door was open. the knob held by a hand, whose arm I followed to find a tall girl of red lips and shirt. She stood tall in the doorway, her chestnut eyes glaring at me through a flicked wing of eyeliner. She was gorgeous. Her nose posh, her lips bold, her face slim and defined, with little unk jewels hanging from her ears. I'd spent a moment admiring her features before I realized that the face they formed was totally automotive, scarily so. They stepped into the room, their gait accentuating the movement of their hips, which revealed her form in her tight white jeans. I was too smitten to be shocked that she'd caught me in a magical act. At this point, I was trapped in a room with a hot French girl. This was slowly becoming a fantasy, really. Her eyes were deep, and they locked onto mine. You must be Celeste, I gurgled. I'm James. I extended a nervous hand for her to shake, even though she was halfway across the long room. Her expression narrowed, a slight grin forming on her luscious lips. Her head shook. She looked like a cat about to pounce. The fingers on her right hand twitched. She flicked her wrist and the hilt of a weapon materialized in her hand. A whole sword erupted from the hilt, making a sound akin to a rip in space. Two nozzles popped up on the sword's hilt, and from them a helix of blue flames burst, encircling the blade. My mouth hung open. I backed up, stalking past the vanity table. She advanced to my every step. Holy shit, I uttered. Where does everybody get these weapons from? You've made a big mistake coming here, she said. Her accent was strong. It was undeniably hot. There were lots of things in this situation which were objectively hot. I don't know what I've done, I squealed, but shut up, she ordered. Her flames danced on the sword. She pointed its end to my neck. I gulped. I know you're a hunter or an agent of Heslik. You're after Eva Arol, but you found me, and I'm about to make your life infinitely worse. Up to chair, please don't, I begged. I glanced hastily around the room for an escape, but there was none bar shattering the window. I could feel the heat of her flame's helix on my face. I was sweating now, and I saw only one way out. I gripped into the air, twisted my body, and flung my hand forward with all of my might. Nothing happened. We both looked at my hand, both slightly confused. I tried it again, and once more, nothing happened. I laughed nervously. A frown slithered across her bold red lips. I panicked and tried again. Then again. My mind ran. Just convert the energy. It's easy. Quattro into kinetic. Convert. Convert. It was like flicking a lighter and only getting a spark with no flame. I couldn't transfer the energy. I couldn't do it. Oh my god, you're kidding, right? She asked. I almost feel bad about this. Her sword glowed an electric blue, and from it burst a bolt of bright blue quattro. Instinctively, I raised my hands to shield my face. I stumbled down as it happened, tripping on something behind me. My hand caught the blast of quattro energy, and I could feel it pressing through my veins like hot gas. The force of it knocked me back. I couldn't let it reach my thread, or I'd be dead. Those split nanoseconds of fear kick-started my connection. I drew in as much quattro as I could. The invading bolt got almost to my neck before I'd flushed it from my system. It flew from my left arm into the ground as a mottled blue and green bolt of quattro. I landed square on my butt. With my connection re-established, I bounced straight to my feet. Celeste gritted her teeth. The flames on her sword, whose point was still aimed at my throat, burst into a plume. A great jet of flames poured from the sword. I leaped backwards, my feet connected to the air around them. They blasted air downwards subconsciously as I leaped. I was flung on jets of air into a backflip over the bed. I slammed my hands down and blasted a cushion of air upon which to land. I was surprised at my prowess in the face of danger. The immediate peril and my sudden strong connection opened me up to a new sensation. I felt the quattro surging my thread. I felt my breathing, not in my body, but in my soul. From somewhere in my thread, in the realm in between Omicronius and I felt an object. It was a disturbance in the pipeline, like a lump under my skin. I itched at the feeling in the void, and realized that it was in my left forearm, just beneath the veins. The disturbance was bulky and thick. My realization of the sensation made my skin crawl. I flicked my wrist as if that would make it go away, and it worked. The sensation of the object shot through my arm and out of my palm. In my hand, I now held a grip, and from the grip erupted an impressive staff. It ended in a twin-pronged fork and had a razor-thin green blade which ran the entire length of the front face. This was the blade from the figure in my dreams. Simply by holding it in my hand, my senses were magnified tenfold. It acted like an amplifier, channeling my soul connection to the elements around me and strengthening them. My mind was blown trying to comprehend the instant feeling that it gave me. I was so entranced that I almost didn't notice the plume of bright blue flames as they barreled towards me. I connected to the air around me through my pronged staff. The connection was instant and more concentrated than I could have ever previously imagined. I rammed the 4-foot pronged pole in front of me like a magical pike, and a powerful jet of air followed it. The flames split over the dome of wind, encircling me but not touching me. The door creaked open behind the French girl. She snarled and pivoted to face the intruder. I held my staff ready to strike again. Natalie poked her head through the crack, then burst her way in. She slammed the door behind her and glared at Celeste with eyes of scorn. She flicked both her wrists, and 2 swords, like retro-futuristic cutlasses, appeared in her palms. Oh, well, of course Natalie can already do that, I sighed. She pointed the weapons at Celeste. The French girl backed away from the 2 of us, right into David's dresser. Her sword flames thickened as they encompassed the sharp blade. "What the hell is going on here?" Natalie asked. Her voice was hushed. She wasn't trying to draw attention to the scene. "I knew it," Celeste scowled. "Agents, the 2 of you. You've heard the rumors about me, I'm sure of it. You know what happens to Sonever who tried to capture me." "Hold up," Natalie demanded. She opened her grip, and the swords dissolved back into her arms, back to the void from whence they came. I looked at my hand. How did she do that? I opened my hand, but the staff just dropped to the floor. I quickly recovered it. "Who the hell are you?" she asked. "Should we know you?" "You're Celeste, aren't you?" I asked. The girl looked confused. The flame on her sword simmered down. "No, I don't believe that. I'm not that stupid," she spat. Her eyes darted between Natalie and me. "That's the oldest trick in the book. You know exactly who I am. I'm not going with you anywhere." "Fine. Who do you think we are, then?" Natalie pestered. "Funny," the girl scorned. "You're agents of Ferrer Heslik, or Naxa Agol's mobsters. You've come for the bounty on Eva Agol, but you've come to the wrong place." "Well, who is Eva Agol?" I asked. Without the ability to put the weapon away, I lay it down across the bed as a sign of good faith. Celeste seemed even more confused. Her fingers twitched on her sword's grip. "Who is Eva Agol?" She mocked my question. "You've never heard of the missing Agol daughters?" "Well, I've only heard of the Seneva for a few weeks, period." "We only fired our first bolt of Quattro a week ago," Natalie added. The girl's gaze darted between Natalie's eyes and mine. The spark of her rage fizzled as she pulled our honesty from our expressions. She stumbled on what to do next, the flames in her sword spattering. "You're being serious, aren't you?" she asked. "I can see it in your eyes." She let the flames encompassing her sword vanish. "I believe that you're new. You had trouble connecting," she said to me. I blushed red. "But you?" She pointed at Natalie with a paranoid finger. "You're more connected than a week old Seneva." I frowned. Natalie smiled. "So I've been told." Natalie passed off the compliment. "My name is Natalie Athanas, or Zamel. I'm a student of Lilawal. This is James Gray, or Makey. He's a student of the Ghost Kuvalik." "Students of Lilawal and Kuvalik?" Celeste asked. She dissolved her flaming sword back into the plane of her thread. I stared at my weapon, lying on the bed, hoping that maybe it would dissolve itself if I did nothing at all. "You know, I don't think I can afford to be in the room with 2 high-profile Seneva like yourselves. I'm sorry, I have to leave." Natalie blocked the entrance. "High profile?" she asked. "What are we missing here?" "Oui, high profile," Celeste repeated. She was sweating now. Even in her anxiety, she was still beautiful. "They're just an old lady and a ghost," Natalie said. "Oh, more like the most connected Seneva alive and the past king of the Electric Nation. No thanks, I'm not hanging around for that kind of attention, even if you're oblivious to it. If you're telling the truth, Heslik better not know who your teachers are. You'll have a high priority on his radars." "I've already talked to Heslik, actually," I added in. "Plus, if our teachers were high profile, surely we'd have met a few more Seneva by now." "Ah, great," Celeste laughed. "This only cements your inexperience. You must let me leave now," she demanded of Natalie, but Natalie would not budge. "I passed Heslik off. He's moved on," I said. "There's nothing to worry about here." "Oh, Heslik would never move on," Celeste stated. She glared at Natalie. Natalie remained determined not to move, the stare between the girls intensifying. Celeste grumbled, and summoned her sword again. "How long have you been doing this alone?" Natalie blurted. Celeste scrunched her face, her head knocked back in the recoil of her expression. "What kind of a question is that?" she asked. "It's probably a good one," Natalie frowned. "I don't think you should leave. It sounds like you've got a lot of troubles. What if we could help you through it all? You can't get through life alone." I abandoned my staff on the bed and leaped over the furniture to be closer to the 2 girls. Celeste fidgeted at my movement. She was about to flick her sword towards me, but constrained herself. "I'm sorry, this is not how this works." "Well, why not?" Natalie prodded. "You're weak old Seneva. There's no way you're prepared for what I've been facing." "You almost didn't believe we were a week old. Why not let us prove ourselves?" Natalie demanded. "Because it's too dangerous," Celeste yelled, then caught herself. The room was silenced by her heavy breath. I could feel it between my fingertips. She was anxious, her fear building, and I didn't think it was us whom she found frightening. "Well, it's too dangerous for one person alone," Natalie said and stepped aside. "But you'd know it more than we would. Sorry for blocking your way." "Thank you," Celeste said, hurriedly. Her voice wavered. She dissolved the sword in her hand, once again, as if to tease me with how easy that was, and stumbled boldly through the door. She left it open as she passed. Natalie and I shared a glance. She frowned, and I shrugged. I turned back to the bed, to the action figures I'd knocked over and the great massive pronged staff I'd left upon the duvet cover. "You don't know how to put away your shaft, do you?" Natalie asked behind me. "My shaft?" I asked. Your weapon. Oh, no, not really, I admitted. The door to the bedroom closed, and I turned to face it. Celeste had come back into the room. Her face was drawn. Her eyes, I could see now, had bags under them. She looked both taut yet relieved. I'll take your offer, she sighed. You're right, it is dangerous, and I've needed help for a while now. Natalie grinned widely. I wasn't quite sure how to respond. I hadn't suggested helping at all. But, the French girl continued, there are two things before I let you join me. The first is that if it does help you, you may never cross me. I've had enough of being let down and used as a pawn. If you dare use my trust against me, I swear to the black gold you will pay for it. Noted, I squeaked. Secondly, if you are truly ignorant of my situation, which at this point I believe, you should know what you're walking into. Well, we want to help. Tell us everything, Natalie smiled. She had a way of speaking, the tone of her voice, the way she positioned herself, that could put anybody at ease. As I well knew, she could also turn around and do the exact opposite. Celeste appeared so calm. Well, 7 years ago, Naxer Arol, the Green Dragon, Mr. Agol, whatever you call him, lost his two daughters. The eldest, Amélie Leroux, was not a Seneva. The youngest, Celeste Leroux, Iva Arol, was the Seneva of Hiver and Jena, fire and oxygen. He lost both his daughters the day that he murdered my father. Natalie gasped, but Celeste did not stumble on her words. She was numb to them. I have the same connections as his daughter, to Hiver and to Jena. I share a first name with her. Since the bounty was placed on her return, I have become a target, seen as a walking pile of money to hunters who have mistaken my identity. The only person who was ever good to me was a Soneva priest in Paris. Everybody else has tried to sell me for a bounty. Good lord, that's awful, Natalie said. Right now, my biggest threat is from his agents. He's joined the search for the Arol daughters. His trackers are the best in the world, but they've set their sights on me instead. Celeste sighed. Her story made me nervous. She was ready to murder me just before, on the slight chance that I could have been a threat. She's hardened, well beyond anybody I'd met before. We were about to take a merry stroll into peril, fights which were potentially way above our damn skill levels. We'll be happy to help you, Natalie said. I know we will. It's the three of us now. She put a hand on Celeste's shoulders. The girl accepted it, although was reluctant to smile brightly and let down her guard. The three of us? It rang in my mind. The three of us against what? I remembered Celeste's agonized breaths in my fingers. I started to pale. Please, do not break this trust I have given you. I'm tired of it. I'm so tired. Celeste flopped herself onto the bed. I pulled aside my staff just in time so that she wouldn't lay on it. So, if you're not this Eva character, who are you? Natalie asked. Celeste glanced up to give her a pointed look. I could see her considering whether to answer, but she sighed and relaxed. Celeste Bouvet, Genève. In his handheld device, the bronze Seneva watched a video message from Heslick. He'd been handed this message before he came to Melbourne. He let it play through, the instruction to him which outlined the three Seneva he was to find and present to the Farah. Once it played through, he tossed it onto his bed. He stormed out of the compound, marching past Vestas, whom was conducting experiments, and into the warm autumn night. Lion's foot gripped into the earth by his feet with his soul connection. Running forwards and heaving upwards, a block of asphalt was launched up from under his feet, catapulting him into the air. He connected to the iron in the light overhanging the compound's gate and drew it towards him without altering its bonds. Given that the atoms could not escape their alloy in the lamp, they anchored him to the post. He drew them in, subsequently pulling himself onto the pole. He slammed into the light, then pounced off, over the gate and into the night. Landing in a crater of asphalt, Lion's foot brushed himself off and removed his Seneva armor. Underneath, he was wearing his riding leathers and his full face mask. His roadster roared between his legs, carrying him down the streets of Melbourne suburbs. Wind whipped past his face and exposed wrists. Lion's foot dug into the asphalt on turns and dipped into curves, smiling beneath his mask. He brought his roaring beast to a halt outside a modest house. Its exterior was made of ugly, shit-brown bricks. He sneered at the architecture. The whole house looked to be pulled through a time portal from the 70s. There was Seneva inside, and he was sure of that. But he wasn't sure how many there were. 2 of them, though, were the Seneva he was looking for. Lion's foot turned his bike off, just outside the driveway. He sleuthed around the side of the house to where he sensed the active threads. Using his control of Earth to mask his footfalls, he was almost silent. When he was close enough, he crouched to the ground and mashed his palms to the floor. He listened to the voices through the earth. Celeste Bouvet, Genève, he felt the young woman say. That confirmed his suspicions, and he continued listening. As the evening sounds drowned out to a movie, he retired to the door, where he penned a note from paper he'd stored in his jacket. He left it on the doorstep and walked away. Lion's foot believed that he'd done enough. Now was not time to escalate. It was a Sunday night. It was a night of peace. Watch out. The letter read, Hesslick is after the three of you. He's coming, and you won't be able to hide. Natalie and Celeste showed me how to dissolve my staff back into my thread. It wasn't difficult to do, but I didn't get it on the first 2 tries. It involved the feeling of sucking it up your arm and into your thread. I suppose that's the best way to describe it. I had to stop thinking about what I was doing now and just feel it instead. To practice, I summoned the weapon and dissolved it again. I grinned at the new skill, but Natalie seemed unimpressed. Penelope and Tom arrived, and the night kicked off. We ordered pizza and went to sit down by David's projector TV to watch movies. David, the sly dog, had decided that a horror movie would be the best choice. Hey, Celeste said to me as I grabbed a seat to plate from the kitchen. I'm sorry about before, Attacking you probably wasn't the best introduction. Her hand lingered dangerously close to my arm. Her red nails, poised, hung near me. I followed her hand, along her arm, and to her face finally. The skill was beyond stunning. I couldn't even help but realize it again and again. Hey, that's alright, I said. Look, it's good not to paint yourself as a damsel in distress, Ha, me, a damsel in distress? She laughed. James Gray, you have a lot to learn about me, she chuckled. She stepped close to me, close enough that her breath lingered on my cheek. Her eyes sparkled, observing my face as I squirmed. She winked, then slapped my butt. I shot to attention, gobsmacked. She gave me a momentary steamy stare, and with that she strutted off. I almost dropped the plates in shock. Butterflies raged their tempest in my stomach. I rushed down to the den to bring her the plate I'd acquired and eat pizza. For the remainder of the night, I could barely capture her attention, though, whereas Tom and David had her falling to the floor in stitches. Her hand was casually misplaced from time to time, touching a leg here or there of my friends, but not of me. She gave everybody an equally steamy stare, too. I considered scooting closer during the film to try and close the gap, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. She was too good-looking. She wouldn't want me. Sure, she was flirting in the kitchen, but clearly she's just flirty anyway. You got too nervous, dude, I thought to myself as the rumble of a loud, inconsiderate engine drowned out the movie. You got too nervous and you blew it. Well, for tonight, at least. I looked over to Celeste on the couch next to me. Her hand was placed between us. My hand was next to it. The movie was winding to its end. I twiddled my pinky. How easy it would be to just crawl my hand over and atop hers. I extended my little finger outwards like an ant's antennae, feeling for any hints of interest from her. I looked at her bold red lips and her strong gaze. Her eyes were deep in the same way that Natalie's were. My heart was pounding, and I was about to make this move. I let my hand crawl over to hers, my pinky outstretched at its arm's reach, about to touch her skin, about to cross that boundary to the point of no return. I withdrew. I couldn't commit to that move. I felt so weak and so stupid. If Dad was our age, he wouldn't have messed that up. I moaned to myself. I wasn't the only man to fail in his mission to woo that night, though. David had, predictably, not had much luck persuading Natalie to have a romantic interest in him. Tom, however, already had Penelope under his spell, or was already deep in hers, whichever way it went. He kissed her goodnight when she left. Penelope was the first to leave. She had a meeting at school early the next morning. She bent down to adjust her shoe on the doorstep before continuing home. Natalie, Tom, and I left shortly after. I hugged Celeste goodbye, and she held on to me tightly for a brief moment of contact. Good night, James, she said to me in a smooth French accent. Good night, Celeste, I said to her. I smiled. She smiled back, but there was no magic in her eyes. Maybe I just had to let this one go. Alright, you just witnessed what was probably the least sexy French accent ever. I'm sorry. I don't have a high voice. I'm not going to be able to do a seductress. Cool. Keep listening for more of this. Thanks for listening in this far anyway. We are chapter 11 out of 25, so you're basically halfway, really. It's kind of weird, though. Like, we're barely anyway into the story, and we're already halfway. Anyway, see you next time.